Hello, Jim, and thanks for joining. Now, today we're going to be talking about whether or not Jesus was an illegal immigrant. Now, this is being prompted largely because my news feed is a bit of a dumpster fire at the moment. So there's quite a lot about migration, and particularly amongst Christians discussing from both sides. I have people from both anti-immigrant and pro-immigrant on my feed using the Bible to justify their position on either side, right? It can be used by either side. So let's just talk about this and get to the bottom of it. So first off, was Jesus an illegal immigrant? Well, no. First off, he never moves outside of the Roman Empire. Even when Joseph and Mary flee Herod and go down to Egypt, that is still part of the Roman Empire. So it's not immigration, right? And even if it had been, even if Egypt had not been part of the Roman Empire at this point, it would not have been illegal immigration because there was no such thing. People could move. You did not need permission from the state. You did not need permission from the governors or the whatever. You didn't need permission to move. You just moved. And that's what the world was for most of history. You could move in or out of a province or a country or an empire, and it really made no difference, right? There wasn't anything that was legal or illegal about it. We really only get this concept when we start getting nation states in the last few hundred years. So, in trying to apply these ideas of legal versus illegal immigration to the ancient world is quite difficult because they just didn't have this concept. They had the concept of people who were foreign living amongst you, right? People who were not part of your ethnic group or who were not part of your, sort of in group or were not from your area originally. And we have them described as foreigners, strangers, or aliens in your land, right? And we have quite a lot particularly in the Old Testament, about how we should be treating these people in Israel, right? In the land of Israel, how you would treat them. And is generally speaking to treat them as you would treat any of your native born people. They should be treated no differently than anyone else. They shouldn't be ignored by the law or given less privilege or less protection under the law just because they are not originally from your area, right? So we have that sort of concept. We also have, it's a lot more ethnographic in sort of parts of the biblical world, where your sort of place of origin is more in regards to your descendancy from various groups. So there is this very different construct and concept that is not really applicable once we come to the modern idea of nation states. So that's one issue that we face, and it's why you have people saying, well, that doesn't apply to illegal immigration versus legal immigration, right? Because, well, foreigners in your land is only the legal people, but there was no such thing as being legally or illegally in a place, so you can't apply it in that way when we're talking about the biblical text. And certainly when these things are described and explained particularly in the Old Testament, it talks about how Israel was once strangers in Egypt. So you should remember that when you are applying laws to the strangers in your land, right? So we see that in the Bible. But we also see people using other texts saying that you should, follow the law of the land. God put the authorities in place. Now, I'll probably do another one at some point about the use and misuse of Romans 13 and regarding the idea that we submit to governing authorities and how that has been used and misused throughout history. But certainly that tends to be applied by people who agree with the law, right? If you agree with the law, you tend to use Romans 13 and go, you got to follow the law. It says you got to follow the law. But these same people will, if they disagree with a law, would say, but that doesn't apply, right? oh no, you don't apply, you don't follow non-biblical laws, right? You don't follow the law or the governing authority if it doesn't align with my ideas, right? So there's that sort of juxtaposition that we see a lot in this argument, that if you agree with how the deportations and all of that, if you agree with that, you're likely to say, oh, we've got to follow the law, right? And that the idea that we treat the stranger the same way as we treat someone who is of our country, that they don't apply, right? That's one argument. And then the other side is, but it says to treat the foreigners ourselves and we need to love our neighbour and the like. So we have both sides, and this is true of many issues in history. We will have people cherry picking the verses and the passages that support their argument over the ones that don't support it. And I think this is a problem often in our interpretation of the Bible, is that oftentimes we can find what we want to see, right? If we want it to be pro immigration, we can find verses that talk about immigration and how, we should be nice to those who immigrate. If you want it to be anti immigration, you can talk about issues with, where it talks about don't allow foreigners to live among you and things like that. So there is this sort of juxtaposition where you can find both sides. And there have been many, many issues in history where the Bible has been used on both sides of a debate to justify their positions. And this is why it can sometimes get difficult when we're applying this. And I think, particularly when we're dealing with this in a modern concept, we must remember that, right? A lot of people like to forget, or they like to think that they would have been on the right side of history, right? Forgetting that most people aren't. Most people will side with whichever side is less problematic for them, right? So you can look at it with slavery. Most white people, whether or not they benefited from slavery, they didn't do anything to stop it. And a lot of them even used the Bible to justify their position, but it's against the law. It's, it's legal, so that makes it right? We see the same thing happening in Nazi Germany. Probably get in trouble for saying that, but we see the same thing in regards to the Holocaust and things like that. There were certainly religious people who used the Bible to back up what was happening, that this was justified, that this was biblical. So, but we can also look at the people who use the Bible to say no, that this doesn't apply, that these aren't biblical concepts, that these aren't biblical rules, and we should not live by that. So this is always the issue, and people will often go, but my side is biblical and your side isn't. And I think this is what we really need to remember, particularly as Christians, when we are applying things and looking at things, is just because someone can pull out a Bible verse and say, oh, this is what it is, that you're going to have issues both ways. It can be used both sides. And look, for me personally, you don't have to agree with me or whatever, and I'm sure in the comments there will be a bunch of people commenting how I'm wrong about lots of things. They generally are. But for me, I tend to side on the side of love. For me, I would say that the Bible is fairly predominant in it's talking about looking after foreigners and strangers among us, and that is what is applied in love your neighbor, particularly when we see that the Samaritan was considered a foreigner in Israel. So I think that when we're talking about these things, the idea that we are loving our neighbor should not be just those who are here, legally, or who are like us. You don't have different laws for your citizens versus non-citizens. That's just not how the world should work. And basic human rights should apply to everyone, regardless of who they are and what they have done. We have human rights for a reason, and they should apply. So that's my hot take. You can agree with it, disagree with it. Honestly, at this point, there'll probably be some sort of argument in the thing about how I'm, yeah, a progressive, or how I am, just a, you know, I'm committing the sin of empathy to say that we should, treat people the way we would like to be treated. And if that's not how you would like to be treated, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Right. So I'm sure that there'll be a lot to be said by a bunch of different people regarding this. But look, that's my take on things. And I think the thing that we should remember is the Bible is an ancient book. It is not dealing with our modern concepts in the same way as we will. So it is often difficult to make straight line connections between things. So that's my take. And if you're looking for more about the Bible, its history, and all that, stay tuned for more with Bible history with me, Bear. Catch you later.